For the most part, the writing when it's Mark Waid is fantastic. And that's it.
Okay.
Yep. I just want to keep it short.
No, it's okay. I mean, we're going to have a lot to discuss, so we can definitely add on to those points later. David, you just read this, literally.
Oh yeah, I just finished. Batman
what were your...
steak.
Oh, the steak. That was a very crucial scene, yes.
But they didn't get it right.
They didn't get what right?
His steak. They didn't get it right.
Oh, right.
Batman's pissed. Anyways, he's a good detective, though. Overall, I liked it. You know, I used to read comic books all the time, and now I only read them occasionally. But it kind of reminded me, not exactly the same, but there was a whole series called 0 Hour. Reminded me a little bit of that, which I really liked. And I don't know when this one came out as opposed to that one. I'm assuming this was way before that.
About 2 or 3 years after.
After? Oh, okay. But anyways, yeah, it was an interesting story about power and evil and apocalypse. And I was there was a lot of characters. At one moment I thought that Captain Marvel, who's also Shazam, is that true? Wait. I don't know.
They've renamed him Shazam.
Okay, that's what I thought. Anyways, but for a while I thought like they just had a clone of Superman and he was just going to do evil things because he looks so much like young Superman, right? They look very similar. And then they put that weird... Anyways, I liked it. Yeah.
All right, cool. And Mike, we don't need to hear from you because you posted your review.
All right, I'm done. I'm out. Anyone read it?
I read it.
Okay.
Go home.
I gotta say quickly, mostly for Alicia, but this is the original Captain Marvel from 1941. He was the only superhero that ever sold more than Superman. And then Carol Danvers became Captain Marvel only in the 2000s. But in between, and this is the Fawcett Comics Captain Marvel, who was bought by DC. Carol Danvers is Marvel.
Okay.
Marvel has about 5 of their own Captain Marvels because they scooped up the name, but this is the original. And the reason he looks like Superman is because he was created as a competitor. And so that's part of the story is that no one is as strong as Superman except for this guy who was kind of an in joke, created to be his competitor, you know?
Okay, so that's why he was the only one who could block Superman at every turn at that one point in the book. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. See, I'm so glad. I wish I could have you as a footnote, like just beside me, so I could be like, "Hey, Mike, what's happening?"
Well, you need his audio track as the background, yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, all those Easter eggs were intentional. It was, even for me, I was like, every panel was like, "Who the hell's that? Who's that? Who's that?" But it was deliberate. Like they wanted you to like. They wanted to refer to other comics and cartoons and movies, so it was all there throughout. Anyway, my quick review is, like I said online, I do think it was good. I don't like it as much as I did when I first read it, but unfortunately, Alex Ross has a history of doing a lot of comics like this where he has a nostalgia for like Super Friends and 70s movies, because that's when he grew up. So all of his stuff tends to be sort of like a throwback to that. But I think this one is his best written one because Mark Waid wrote it. But I feel like the first 2 issues were mostly just set up, where Alex Ross was like, imagine if the Flash was like this. Imagine if Green Lantern was like this. And then Mark Waid had to figure out a way to kind of write it. But then I felt like once they got to number 3 and the story started to really pick up, I thought it was really good. Like the twist with Batman, betraying Luthor by finding out the Captain Marvel was actually not Captain Marvel. It was Billy Batson, grown up. That was so cool. Which, of course, he kind of got that idea from Miracle Man, but whatever, we'll talk about that later. And then I like the ending. I love that last scene when they're sitting in the restaurant. I thought was the best scene in the whole story, in the whole book. But anyway, we'll talk more about that later.
All right, cool. So you were mentioning Alex Ross. So let's talk about his art a little bit, because when this came out, Ross was a high-profile artist, having come off of a similar title called Marvel, or Marvels, I should say. Yeah. Yeah, so that was taking place in the Marvel universe, and it was interesting because it took the perspective of an everyday citizen living in New York and what it's like to see all these gods and superheroes and monsters fighting each other and kind of just feeling insignificant in the face of it. There's been a lot of descriptions of Ross's art. Photorealistic is a term that's thrown around a little bit. Definitely, he is indebted to Norman Rockwell and his painting style. But it's a very unique style that hasn't been done too much in comics prior to him, and not too much since, though there have been some emulators. I'm just wondering, overall, how did you feel about the art in the book?
I think that it's too much. It's I don't prefer it for the same reasons that I really hate people who do photo comics. Because it's like it feels like it doesn't belong. Like his art is sort of rides like this fine, very fine line of like fine art but also illustrative work. And I think like it teeters back and forth, and sometimes it kind of goes overboard, like in a showboaty kind of way. And and maybe it suffers from being like too realistic when there are just like scenes with like a lot of things in them. Yeah.
Okay, well,
I personally like really like his art, but I found it really hard. I remember reading this and really enjoying it, and then reading it again. I found it sometimes hard to follow some of the panels, just because it was just so. Sometimes you were just bombarded with faces, and sometimes the panels were just really, really cluttered with detail, and it makes it really hard to read that kind of thing.
I agree, but I disagree. This is kind of the style of art that I gravitate towards. It had kind of a Jeff Lemire feel to me. Like Jeff Lemire has less detail, but the colors and the way they kind of blended together, it kind of reminded me of that. I conveniently have one right here. Although now that I'm looking at it, it doesn't remind me of it at all. But I don't know, just the way he does color, just it kind of that's how it reminded me of Jeff Lemire. I like that kind of realistic stuff. I like it to be a little bit pretty, fancy. But I do agree with Julie's point. When there was a lot of stuff going on, yeah, my eyes didn't know where to look. Like when there was multiple characters in there, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, who's speaking? You know, because here's this speech bubble just in the middle of nowhere, and it's like I don't know who's saying that, or the action that's going on. It was just such a big, loud noise of color that it was. Now that you mention it, Julie, it was a little hard to follow, but I don't know. I also really enjoyed it because it was really lush and detailed, and that's my jam.
Okay, so going off of that, Dave, this is your first exposure to Alex Ross and his art. What did you make of it?
Well, I've seen Alex Ross before, but I don't know. I don't really know exactly who's who. I just know certain art looks a certain way. But I don't know. It was really slick. Kind of looked like a painting, realistic, which I assumed he was going for because of the story and the human versus superhuman thing. But I don't know. It can be at times a little disorienting, like Jolie and Alicia were mentioning. But overall, I think it works well for the story. It gives it something different. It's not like super cartoony or super comic booky. It's a different category.
Well, Mike, I'm not ignoring you. I want to come back to you.
Sure.
But I want to kind of tie in all these points that you three mentioned. You know, there's one thing we have to look at when it comes to comics, where it's not only is the art well rendered, is the composition well done, but sequentially, do the panels flow? Does it make sense from panel A to B, or how the layout is on the page? Did that disrupt your ability to get information from the book? Was that one of the things that you had trouble with?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Only sometimes. I remember there's a couple instances where I was reading where there wasn't much happening dialogue wise, but it was all supposed to be like communicated through storytelling. And there wasn't really, like, I had to look a few times to see what was happening, like, to kind of decipher what was happening in the panel. Like, he is so skilled beyond belief. Like, to just be able to, like, render Superman so that you recognize him every time you see him as the same person in this photorealistic way is like amazing. But it's sometimes things get messy. It's not, I don't know.
Like, I'm trying to find an example right now really quick, like something like this moment, towards the end, page 193, if anyone's interested in looking it up. But something like this, where you have our everyman in the church, the pastor, McCay. Like, it's just beautiful. It's beautifully rendered. Your eye knows exactly where to look. But then you have something. I'm gonna try and quickly find one. Gonna be in the fight scenes.
Like, I'm sitting on like issue number 4, page 4. There's like a huge fight scene with like Superman and Shazam in the right corner.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go to the next, which is fine. And this is what I'm saying. Like, it's all technically perfect. Everything's to scale. For them, well, he's kind of lousy at feet. I'm surprised, but like, if you go to like the next splash page that you get, where like you see the Spectre talking to McCoy, above it is like sort of the same panel, but from above, like it took me so long to decipher what was happening in that panel because it was just a mess.
Well, here's another one. Yeah, like here's this isn't working out so well, is it?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of the fight ones where you're just it just registers as noise because there's so much color, there's so much happening that it's just like you don't really know where to look. But it looks beautiful from far away, but like, yeah, I'm agreeing with Jolie on this one.
Yeah, like, and his control, like, and also to watercolor this is like really ambitious. His control of watercolor is crazy. You don't get he doesn't get any kind of like blooming at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how much of it was like he's just really technically skilled, or he redid a lot of things, and some of them are like kind of like cut and paste redos and then put on top of things. But like sometimes the color, the palette is too messy, and that's where you get confusion. What are we looking at here?
You guys see my screen?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, I mean, you guys could all share it to show the art better. But anyway, can you see this? Can you see where my mouse is?
Yeah.
Yes.
That is one of the most creative things in the book, where they're showing that John Jones is disguised as this other guy, and the fact that they show Spectre lifting up that veil like that is one of the most creative things in the book. But unfortunately, like, other than his realism, I actually don't think he's not a great designer, and he's not a great storyteller, you know. And when this came out, I was blown away by his art. But unfortunately, I don't think he's really improved in like 20 years, you know? And so I do like it, but I think the novelty has worn off for me. And unfortunately, there's certain people, especially people that Jolie and I know, that think that this type of art is the be all end all, and they can't stand cartoony art. But I personally would rather look at like the Super Friends cartoon from the 70s, you know? But anyway, I do like this art. Like, if you can see this page, like, it is incredible to see what would superheroes really look like, especially since in the 90s there weren't many superhero movies, right? It was really cool to see what they would all look like as real people. So that was cool. But
yeah, like, if you just leave it there for a sec.
Sure.
Like in the third one, technically the fourth panel, but the third panel of the inset, like, he doesn't need to render the 3 other superhumans behind him.
Yes.
And that's what I kind of hate about this is that like he does that all the time. He does that everywhere. Like in the restaurant, when Batman turns around and asks, or someone turns around and asks Batman if he's using the ketchup, the faces of all the people at that man's table are also rendered like to completion and full visible. Like it's unnecessary, and it really is. It just creates this chaos that like detracts from the story and the dialogue and the actual his actual art. Like if he was a good storyteller and he wasn't just showboating, he would have left those faces out. So
yeah, because with a camera, those faces would be slightly out of focus. Or if you were ideally, if you were a cartoonist, you'd design the page that you wouldn't have to render them. You know. Yeah, that's true.
Well, Mike, even if you go back to the previous page, like
at
I'm
the
thinking
bottom there, the people around the table in the background look like they're blurred out just a tiny bit.
Yeah. But even when we look at the structure, like the one panel on the right side of Superman's head, the elongated one, it's completely cutting off the Spectre.
That's terrible. I noticed that is like the worst panel design in the whole comic, because he could have just put the bottom of the panel like right here. Why did he need to show all these stairs and then cover up Spectre's face? Terrible.
Maybe he didn't draw it all.
No. Well, Alex Ross, I think he did do all the art for this. The other thing about Ross is there's some editions of this collected which have a little information in the back showing his technique, how he would go about making his art. He would often render panels based upon photographs and studies he would do of people. So while that's novel, in a way that's also limiting, because if you're basing a character's facial expressions or gestures off of what's happening in a photograph, that doesn't allow you the same flexibility or freedom that you could do at open-handed, just illustrating. And I think even though technically speaking, like Jolie's been saying, it's kind of marvelous art, on the other hand, there's a lot of limitations that come to the style.
Yeah, like the seeing, like I used to get Wizard back in the day, and they used to have like cutaways with Alex Ross because he's such a genius, and it'd be like him at his little table, and then just like you'd see at the side just all this photo reference of like his friends in different poses, and then how he would replicate those exact poses and that exact lighting. Like he would model the photograph as it was supposed to look in the comic. And again, like Adam said, it's super limiting. And you could tell when he does it because there's this shot where you see Shazam, I think it's Shazam, where you see him from below, but he's sort of floating above. And the foreshortening on the bottom of his foot is like all messed up. And like, I was shocked to see that. And I was like, it's clear that this man works from photos and that he actually like might not be so great outside of those photos, because that foot is terrible, my darling. Like it's bad.
Like I hate, like here's the thing is, I would like, there's an artist named John Buscema who I consider one of the best realistic artists in comics, and he didn't, I mean maybe he did use photos, but as far as I know he didn't, because he could draw 8 pages a day. I'd like to see Alex Ross draw without photo reference, because I hate to say it, but if you have hand-eye coordination, anyone can copy a photo. Yeah. I'm not saying that Alex Ross is not talented, but it really, to me, diminishes my admiration of him when I know, like Jolie said, you can see he's just copying a photo of his buddy dressed up as Green Goblin, you know? It's not as impressive to me as like Alex Toth or John Buscema or Jack Kirby.
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting point to come off of, because we're focusing a lot on the art. And the thing about comic art is that it really should help emphasize or tell the story. We're going to come back to the relation of the art and the storytelling in a moment, but I want to talk about the framing device of this, because I actually thought this was pretty unique, that they have the pastor, Norman McCoy, or McKay, pardon me, Norman McKay. So this was kind of part of a wave of comics that were happening in the late 80s, early 90s, where we would see through the perspective of normal people what it was like to live in a world populated with superheroes. So Watchmen is an example. I already referenced Marvel's. Astro City, I think you could throw in there as well. What did you think about the choice to view the narrative through the eyes of Norman McKay? Was this effective? Would it have been more effective if it was done third person perspective? What are your thoughts?
I have one thing to say. I think I liked it in 1995 or 6, but now that I reread it, I was really wondering if they could have just completely taken that out and what effect it would have had on the story. I don't think I don't think I liked it as much as I did the first time. And one of the reasons is because there's a book called The History of the DC Universe of all the Marvel first 2 issues. It felt like I was reading that. It didn't really feel like a story. It felt like the Spectre just explaining everything to Norman McKay. Like, here's the Flash, here's Green Lantern, here's whoever. And so even when I got to the end, I was like, oh, because I haven't read it in a while. I was like, oh, now we're going to find out why it's so important that he's here. But I just read it, and I'm like, I don't remember. Why did he have to be there again? Did he contribute anything? Did he do anything? No. Superman and Captain Marvel did. So why was he there? But anyway, that's just me. Maybe I'm wrong.
I felt like it was a really cool concept. It made me think a little bit of like Nick Carraway in The Great Gatsby. Just that filter for the audience to kind of see, like, because what's Nick do? He kind of judges Jay Gatsby and Daisy and all them, and so that's kind of what McKay is doing. But wouldn't it be so much more interesting to, instead of guide your audience with how to feel about what's happening, why not just let your audience decide for themselves? And then the pivotal moment where McKay addresses Superman directly, it kind of fell flat to me. Like, I was really waiting for him to say something super profound, and instead it felt like something you'd see on a motivational poster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, though? Like, it just really kind of fell flat. It just felt like those tired old, like, just do your best and be yourself and it'll be fine. And it's like, no, Superman's about to kill everyone. Like, I really expected something a lot more profound in that moment. So yes, like, just anyone could have jumped in there and spoken to Superman. Like, it could have been Wonder Woman. It could have been just literally anyone. It could have been Spectre. Like, so yeah, like, at first I was like, yeah, it was such a good idea. It was so cool. But no, you guys are right. Like, it didn't really do much.
I don't think he needed to be there. Like,
What
I get,
about?
yeah, I don't know.
Well, Dave, I'm going to ask this of you and of the group. What about the first issue? Because this was the one moment that really did stand out for me. McKay is in the aftermath of that big meta-human fight, and the civilians are hurt, and he's trying to help the wounded. That was the only moment I really felt where we had a feeling of being a human in this fantastical world where we're reminded we're insignificant. Compared to all these other things around us, we're ants. And that sense of hopelessness, I actually felt that from McKay. I really did feel that was translated well in the book. But I want to know your opinion on that, Dave. Was that effective for you? And then I want to hear from other people what their thoughts are on that.
Well, I think in the beginning it was definitely way more effective than as the story carried on, because he's always like, what am I going to do? And then that guy with the cape was like, you have to wait. But I think it was to tie into the whole biblical, and the whole apocalypse theme, which works. But yeah, I don't know. I was wondering, like, did he need to do all that stuff? I don't know. And for everyone that's wondering, I just read this now in the course of maybe an hour and a half. So it's the first time I read it all at once. And yeah, I don't know. I think he served a purpose, but I think he did kind of near the end kind of lose that purpose. I don't know. That's what I'll say.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, to be honest, I agree. Like, the reason he was there as a priest was obviously to have the, what's that called? Like, the allusion to Armageddon or the Book of Revelation. But they should have pushed that more. They should have developed it more. Like, his character was a priest, but they didn't develop like a crisis of faith or, they didn't develop it enough for it to be as effective as they wanted it to be, I don't think.
Yeah, like, they even wrote sort of like a crisis of faith for Superman, when he like goes on a tirade, and Spectre watches McKay watch that happen, and what happens as a result, and then like after everything's done, it cuts to him just like delivering the same old boring ass sermon. Probably like there's no lessons.
Right, he doesn't change. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing changes, and I feel like I feel like the inclusion of that character was maybe not like fleshed out well enough. Like it was a good idea, but like why? The whole time Spectre's like, no, 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 you gotta wait because your role is pivotal. It's coming, but not just yet. Like we don't act yet. We don't act yet. And then he says, okay, here's when we act. And I was like, what? What's happening? What? And then nothing happens. I was like, wait, that's it? That was the climax of 4 issues and nothing really. There's not really a huge big choice. Like it doesn't turn out that he's somebody that we don't like. He's an aged version of someone he doesn't remember or whatever. Ugh, anyway,
Like, and that's what I was thinking. It's like at the very beginning we had Wesley Dawes, who's the original Sandman. It would have been nice to find out that this old man was, like Jolie said, like maybe it's Dick Grayson or maybe it's whoever, but someone who the reader can go, oh, look, it's whoever. And now they're going to be really important. But to just introduce this random old man, I just wonder what the point is, you know? But
yeah. Like other than to make him relatable to the reader, maybe, which he's not.
No.
Like,
well, an old white pastor, I mean, you know, that can only be relatable so far to so many people,
exactly.
right?
yeah.
So he was basically, he could have been one of those life-size cardboard cutout stands, and for all that he did. Another point that I want to make, though, so they don't have the Olympics anymore. They don't have the World Series because here's all these super beings that have rendered anyone in humanity doing anything of worth like completely moot, rather. So then why is there still religion? If they have these gods, why is there still religion?
Good
If
point.
we have the Olympics gone, then the Olympics sports, probably the Guinness Book of World Records, you know, if humanity is completely just, well, we're done. All the superheroes are so amazing that we don't have to try anymore. We don't have to put forth an effort. Why is there religion?
Well, I think that's actually a major question asked in the story, and I think it's subtly asked. I mean, the fact that McKay is a pastor, I don't think is accidental or incidental. I think it was on purpose. It ties into that apocalyptic imagery for sure and the references to the book of Revelation. But I think it also asks that question in a world where everything is like a fantasy world. Now, obviously, we don't have superheroes flying around, but even at this point in the late 90s when the comic was released, you know, personal home computers were a thing, telecommunications technology was really increasing, and we had this increasing secularness of mainstream culture. So I think in their own way, Waid and Ross maybe were asking that same question. What's the point of religion when we're basically able to be gods ourselves in our own way? You know, there's not a ton of profound stuff that I think happens in Kingdom Come. I think there's great ideas, but I don't think it has the same level of profundity that something like a From Hell or a Watchmen has. But I do think that's an interesting question that was explored. The problem I feel, and I'm not sure if anyone else will agree with this, like Mike was saying, like Jolie was saying, it was brought up, but wasn't quite explored enough. Like, are the superheroes the new gods? Is that why McKay is not having as many members to his congregation? What does that actually mean for people individually? Like, on a spiritual level, I have no idea what McKay actually believes or feels, or people around him. What is the spiritual crisis going on in a world full of superheroes? That would have been interesting to explore.
Yeah, and instead we get another one of those motivational poster answers, hope. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with religion bringing hope, but they should have gotten a little deeper with it. Mike.
Yeah, I'm so tired of that.
Hang in there, baby.
Do you think it would have been better if they had like Mr. T there saying like, "I pity the fool who doesn't have judgment for shit," you know, like.
And then he punches Superman. That would be
Then he
great.
punches Superman. Yeah.
Oh, if only. That would have been a 5-star comic right there. I don't know. I feel like that theme of hope, it is kind of intrinsically tied into Superman, though, right? I mean, no matter what people say or explore, that's kind of what his character is about, right? Like, it's to the point of cliche where that's all people talk about for Superman. But actually, let's bring him up. I mean, aside from McKay, he is basically the main character of this book. How did you feel about the representation of Superman in this?
He was hot. Sorry, I'm just screwing around. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, no, I was gonna say.
Mike was gonna say the same thing. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think one of the important things about this book is it's very, very metatextual. Like this was created as a criticism of '90s vigilante superheroes like Cable and Youngblood and Punisher and other people. And so this is Mark Waid and Alex Ross's way of commenting on that, I think. And it's almost like Superman represents DC writers and maybe Marvel writers, their self-doubt about writing real superheroes or classic old-fashioned superheroes, you know? And so this is their way of putting that idea into a story, which I think is a great idea. And as a Superman story, yeah, I think it is a good Superman story. I like the way he's portrayed in this, absolutely, for sure. I'm not sure about the dynamic between, like, I'm not sure about Wonder Woman. I'm not sure how they liked the way they did her. You know, I don't know if it really jives with other versions of Wonder Woman, the way she's sort of, it seems a little bit more bloodthirsty, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Other opinions. What did you think about Superman in this book?
It's interesting. I didn't realize he aged or could age. But I mean, I don't know if they ever really addressed that in his outside of like in canon. Did they, Mike?
Well, yeah, no, he aged in the comics too. Like the Earth 2 Superman had gray hair, so I think he does age just slowly.
Okay, but then they established this as canon in Earth. Is it Earth 22 or 2?
Yeah, they actually did Earth 22. You're right.
Okay, so yeah. Typical, I guess. Like you find him on the farm doing Clark Kent things. It's like, yep, okay, that's him. Like just, you know, it's like the same portrayal across all media is like this brooding, self-doubting character. Like even in Smallville, every time he had like a problem, he just went back to the farm. Yeah, do you know what I want to bring up? I want to talk more about like the way that they did Wonder Woman too. It's like, yes. She's a little more bloodthirsty, but I liked that they did that because she saw a need to fill a gap of leadership where everything was falling apart. Because it's like she was like, look, me, you, and Batman. It's been the three of us this whole time, and Batman is God knows where, and you are this mess. And fine, I'll make the choice, and then I'll do it. I don't know that I like the romance though.
Mm-hmm.
That's just weird.
You don't like the Wonder Baby?
Well, yeah.
Hey Adam, can I talk about
Wonder Fetus?
I don't know if we're gonna get to it, but I just want to talk about one of my favorite scenes. Are we gonna talk about Captain Marvel? I can hold off on Captain Marvel if you want.
No, it's open forum. Go ahead.
Okay.
Because can I Superman first, really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, let's do that. Superman.
Let's
get back to hot Superman. Okay.
He felt a little two-dimensional to me. Like there didn't feel like a lot of character depth, and even at the end, his quote-unquote character growth didn't feel that profound. Again, it's like with the story, it's like we missed the mark. It's like it could have been a little deeper, but he just, yeah, he felt like a really flat character to me.
Yeah, he's always sacrificing himself for Earth. Mm-hmm. He's still doing it, and wouldn't you know, someone takes that glory away from him. But like, yeah, I agree. Superman is sort of this two-dimensional, like, I'm always gonna do what's better for everybody else but me.
I felt Wonder Woman was more interesting as a character in her development and growth than Superman. Okay, now you can talk about that.
Oh, I have one thing.
Well, actually,
Oh,
no.
go ahead.
Dave,
Go ahead.
Dave, and then I
go.
have something I want to say. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, a few things. When I first saw old Superman, I was like, "Is this Billy Ray Cyrus?" But secondly, okay, tell me if I'm wrong, but Superman's kind of a stubborn ass, isn't he? Like, he's just like, I lost. I'm gonna go on the farm. The world's falling apart. And then he's like, I guess I'll be the leader again. And then eventually, he's like, I'm great again, and I'm the leader, and I solved everything. I guess I'll have a baby now.
He's like, I told the world, is it Magog? I told them not to depend on this guy, and they did it, and look what happened. He's just, I don't know. He's fighting a lot of demons because I think it's that's always his turmoil, right? It's like saving a world that isn't thankful for him saving it.
Yeah, so he has clearly some resentment.
Yeah. Oh, that's always his chip.
I agree with Dave, though. I think this was a crucial point of mischaracterization that I felt for Superman, though, where why would he just give up out of bitter grapes? I mean, there's this idea that he had some sort of post-traumatic stress happen because he lost Lois Lane and then he was rejected, but that's still so out of character. Like, this is a guy who's like fought like planet-sized aliens and has sacrificed himself multiple times in canon. Like, now he's just being like a bratty teenager and crying on the farm by himself. It just seems like that characterization they had of him just giving up at the beginning of the narrative, and I'm just talking about this narrative, not even going outside of this to canon, but from that to where he ended up as that self-sacrificing Superman, as the person who's going out, who is fighting for right, that seemed disparate. Why was he being this way at the beginning and not at the end? Did all he needed was a pep talk?
And that's a good point, too, because it's like, they mentioned in the beginning that Lois Lane is dead, and that's why he's being emo. And then they never bring it up again. You'd think if it was such an important point, like, I forgot all about it till you mentioned it just now.
No, they brought it up when they showed Magog killing Joker. They brought it up there.
Oh, did they? I don't remember that.
The thing
that
is,
was the first issue, I think.
Yeah. No, I don't think it was. Well, maybe it was. But to me, this is kind of like a trope, like Unforgiven or Logan, when the hero is old, or even The Last Jedi. Luke Skywalker doesn't want to go back. He doesn't want to fight. And then something happens to change his mind and want to come back. So I don't think that's that bad of an idea, because if he didn't have anything to do or to change, what would the story be then? What would he do, right? So I didn't mind that.
It's certainly not a bad idea, but it could have been better executed. It could have been more compelling. Like, if he's that far in his grief that he just wants to write off the entire human race, then he's going to need something a lot more compelling to light that fire under his ass, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I think Mike and Jolie might know what I'm referencing, but a few years ago there was a comic, I think it was a 700 or 800 issue of Superman, I don't remember, but it was What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way. And it was a very similar premise. You have these edgy heroes that represent kind of the new trend of comics, these dark vigilante characters, and Superman is basically upstaged by them. And their whole intent is just to show the world Superman is the old guard. You don't need heroes like him anymore. And Superman ends up getting in a conflict with them. I'm not sure how you felt about that, or anyone who's read that story, but I felt like that was a much more organic and better told way of addressing this same issue. Because Superman is not mischaracterized, misrepresented. In that story, his biggest issue is that these vigilante heroes go about killing villains. And his thing that upsets him most is that he heard kids on the playground saying, I want to be just like them so I can kill bad guys. And he's aghast at that thought. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, I feel like if we're talking about an analogy where this is comic writers talking about the need for edgy, dark comics and how that's conflicting with the standard ideas of the traditional Golden Age superheroes, I felt like that's a better way to do it. That was kind of a tangent. Sorry, I didn't really have a point with that. I
No,
actually
I
just
read
read
that,
that comic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called what's so bad about Truth, Justice, the American Way, or what's wrong
Yes.
with something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I love Mark Waid, and however, I always feel like Alex Ross's comics are like this. So I'm assuming it was mainly Alex Ross's idea. I can't. I don't know what the word for it is, if it's melodramatic or what. But yeah, just definitely something feels forced. Again, we talked about the characterization of Wonder Woman, and then what about Batman complaining that Superman's idea will be sort of fascist or authoritarian, but Batman's the one who's turned Gotham into a police state. So how is his methods any different? So it's almost like they didn't fully think this through and go, okay, this is what it is. They kind of just threw it all in there and hoped you didn't notice that it didn't quite gel, you know? That's what I think. But I want to talk about Captain Marvel because we're running out of time, right? Are we going to stop at 7?
We'll stop around 7. If we go over a little bit, we go over.
Okay, I just want to talk about where is it here? Can you guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
This is my one of my favorite scenes here. Again, to me, this is almost like, I don't even know what it's like, but Captain Marvel is so much more, and Superman are so much more powerful than everyone, that we have this scene of them. He's just walking around in a tux, and look at all their faces. No one breathes in his presence. What is he thinking? They wonder, what will he do next? To them, he is a shark. What does it say? Traveling for prawn.
Trawling.
Oh, trawling for prawn. Okay. It's just so freaking cool. But then I love the fact that, again, this is Mark Waid to me, showing how good a writer he is. The fact that Batman figures it out. Hello, Billy. He figures it out. And then look at Oliver Queen. What? He's not. Are you kidding me? All this time we've been in mortal fear of Billy Batson? I love that. That's one of my favorite parts of the whole comic. Because it's the only part that feels like it's actually written. It's not just Alex Ross throwing his, playing with his toys, put it that way. And then, of course, we have the big ending that has now become sort of famous. I love this. Like, again, yeah, I can complain or criticize Alex Ross all I want, but this is awesome to me. I love this.
So if you just want to pause on that, I don't want to go back to the art at all, but I'm going to. But apparently, yeah.
What?
It's not proportionate, right? Again, this is a fault of him using photo reference. And he has, I read it in an article, which corroborated my fears, is that the model that he used is short in real life. So he had to extend the limbs. You can see where the legs are extended, but not the arms. So they have this weird, like, bodybuilder stumpy quality to everything. So it's like, maybe he is a really good mimic and not a really good, just like, natural artist. Oh, anyway, sorry. It's like, it is iconic, but it's like, the more and more, when I first saw that image, I was so blown away by it, but the more and more I look at it, like, the more and more I see the problems with it. And most of his art, actually.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to argue with that. I just want to bring up my favorite, another one of my favorite moments in the whole thing is right here. This art is excellent, I think. Like, Captain Marvel's face here, and all this whole sequence, the fact that he's holding his mouth is one of my favorite parts. His expression here, and then when he sees the tear, I love it. It's just, and then this face is just awesome. Shazam! It's so good.
So the idea is that the idea of surprise, because it was hard for me to gather this, is that Billy Batson has aged now to the point where he's the same age as Shazam?
As Captain Marvel, yes, right.
Okay, as Shazam.
Yeah. Well, Captain Marvel, yeah. Shazam is the name of the wizard. They've changed it, but it's still Captain Marvel. In this story, it's Captain Marvel.
We should explain in case people aren't familiar. Who here is not familiar with Captain Marvel? Okay, so basically, I'm going to give you the extreme Cliff Notes version. There's a kid who meets a wizard. The wizard gives him a power. When whenever he says Shazam, he turns into a grown-up superhero.
Oh, that was why he whispered Shazam.
Right.
I was like, what happened to the lightning bolt? I thought the lightning bolt was... Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the lightning bolt strikes him. That's what initiates his power. So,
Okay.
There's another key thing. Alicia, did you see the movie Shazam?
Oh,
I'm not.
okay. So that's why when he keeps saying Shazam, 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 he doesn't change because they're the same age. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, he should be changing
Yeah.
back to Billy, but he's not. And I
But that
didn't understand what was happening. But anyway, talk about the movie.
No, that was it. Yeah, I mean, Batman was the only one that figured it out, which is so cool. But in the movie, which is the Jeff Johns version of Shazam, they have two. They have the same mind. So Billy Batson is a kid, 8 years old, 10 years old. He turns into a 20-year-old, but he has the kid's mind. In the original comics, they had two different personalities. So when in this comic, when he's Billy Batson grown up, he has a different personality. So when he's switching back and forth, it's actually two different people. So that's why he's so easily intimidated by Batman, because he's still Billy Batson. He's not Captain Marvel. But here, when he's saying Shazam, not only is he switching back and forth, but the key thing with here is he's using the lightning as a weapon, which he's never done before, which is really cool. And so then when he says Shazam, Shazam 3 times, he uses it right here. Shazam, Shazam, Shazam. He's using it to detonate the nuclear bomb.
That explains so much. See, again, I need Mike there, just like the little asterisk on my shoulder for the footnote. Like,
Ugh.
well, this brings me to what could be one of our final questions. I want to talk about all these references because there's a lot in this book. Now, needless to say, DC Comics, they have a long-standing mythology, decades worth of canonical characters and storylines. And yeah, Waid and Ross, they try to make references to decades worth of storylines and characters to the point where, unless you're a longtime hardcore DC fan, you can probably get confused and feel lost with what's being referenced.
Right.
So how did you feel about these references? Did you feel lost at all? Did they make sense? Were they even necessary?
so lost. So lost.
Dave, it was your first time reading too. How did you feel?
Well, I know some of the references. I just, sometimes I was just like, okay, that must be something from some other time, and I just moved past it. So, yeah, sometimes I can see if someone was just reading it for the first time and they don't know anything really, then yeah, they could probably get lost. But I don't know. I didn't get too lost. I just was like, okay, that's something. What happens next? And I don't know. If that answers your question, I don't know.
No, it's okay. Mike, are you okay over there?
Wait, what? Can you see me?
Yes.
No.
We're still seeing your screen, man.
Yeah, can you change that back?
Oh yeah, okay, I'll change it back. Hold on.
Thank
Hold
you.
on. Shit, how do I do this? Stop screen sharing. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it reminded me of I took English Lit in university, and it reminded me of some of the texts. There were references to external texts, to events going on at the time that the writer was alive, different things like that. And I had the privilege or yeah, I guess privilege of having lots of footnotes and lots of explanations to explain it so I could understand the text. Like if you've ever read anything Arthurian, it's probably a lot like this. Like if you have no idea, if you're just reading The Once and Future King for the first time, you're probably sitting there going, what the fuck's happening? And that was very much what was happening for me with this book.
Yeah, I think Dave can relate to this a little bit because actually we both read Ulysses for the first time a few years ago, I think it was. And it's one of those books that's so metatextual, you really do need to look at the notes at the back of the book or the footnotes to understand half the references Joyce is making.
Yes, Joyce is nuts. I avoided him like the plague.
So I'm wondering, would this have been benefited by having something like that, like a I don't know, some sort of academic version or some edition?
It's hard to say because I've read other comic books where it'll say refer to issue 7, chapter blah, page blah 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 to understand this one little scrap of dialogue, and then they fill up the page with those. So it's so distracting that not caring anymore. You know, like on the one hand, I would like to have something like that with this, but on the other hand, it would really take away from the art, and it would probably take away just as much from the story. But then not understanding took away a lot from the story too. So I don't know.
I think it's different for graphic novels versus novels because you're right. The pictures and the art, main point, basically. You're, as opposed to a book, it's just like, oh, there's text. Here's a little footnote. Okay, I can look down. But yeah, I don't think it would be as effective this way.
No.
So.
I mean, I think it would really distract, but it's one of those things that if you know all the references, it helps it. But if you don't, it shouldn't take away from it, but it probably does a little bit.
You know, I would say, you know, case in point, like Alicia and Dave, they were a little bit confused about Billy Batson. And, you know, without any outright explanation to the reader, and I do go by the philosophy, I forget who said it, but every comic is somebody's first comic. It should be written for two audiences, one who is an established longtime fan and one who's going into it blindly. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but I just feel that's a good rule of thumb to follow when it comes to long-standing superhero narratives.
Well, and I think it's okay when you have small Easter eggs. You know, like Mike was saying, you get or maybe Julie was saying it, you get those panels of all the superheroes, and you'd be looking through them like, oh, that's so and so, that's so and so, that's so and so, and I was looking at those pictures going, okay, someone in the game for a long time probably recognizes all these characters where I don't. But with a main plot point like Billy Batson, yes, there should have been a chapter or two dedicated to his backstory. Like, oh, okay, here's Billy Batson, we've introduced him. Let's do a little bit of backstory and let's come back into present. Like that. Yeah, that's definitely a huge shortcoming.
Billy Boy threw us for a loop.
Oh, Billy Boy. Sorry, my cat's screaming.
I was going to say, who's got a cat that's not showing us their cat?
It's Adam. Adam's guilty.
I'm being selfish.
He showed us the cat earlier. You weren't here yet, Julie.
He's about to be eating, so that's why he's so excited.
Okay.
I thought he understood Billy Boy, you know?
Yeah, he's a huge Shazam fan.
I knew it.
You know what? I wonder if it was like flipped, where it seems to become about Billy and Superman. I wonder if they didn't include the Pastor and the Spectre, or the Pastor, if they would have just showed us how like Billy's story tracks alongside Superman's, I would have been much more interested in seeing that. Yes. Like, because I'm just thinking about your point about like how comics should. I agree with you, by the way. How comics should be created for an audience that potentially has never heard of any of this, but also an audience who is fully aware of everything that's going on, so that both can enjoy. So I was like, oh, do you know what? I'm somewhat familiar because the thing with DC characters is they're so iconic that you almost people who ride motorcycles who don't necessarily read comics all identify with being a Superman. Yes. So, or at least the iconography. So you'll find it. He's so ingrained in like the American way of life that it would have been nice to sort of have a character that maybe not everybody is really, really prepared to visit and like visit with him, how he's being manipulated, and because I felt like it all came along very quickly. And if it
what
weren't,
are they called? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, a while back, Mike and I, for his comic book Syndicate, we did. I'm so sorry. Was it Infinity Wars or Infinity Gauntlet? Gauntlet. I never felt lost through the whole thing. I understood exactly who the main key actors were. I understood what was going on with plot. Like, I understood all along. So, like, it can be done. It just was not done effectively here.
There was one scene that stood out for me. Superman goes to this planet, Apocalypse, and he talks to, there's this villain called Darkseid. And now his son is taken over his rule of this planet. That really didn't need to be there.
No.
That scene added nothing to the entire point of the story, aside from, I think, Alex Ross and Waid going, here's another reference for you guys. And I felt like when Mike talked about, it may have been Mike or Julie, I apologize, I don't remember who, but about the art being a bit showboaty, I feel like the storytelling itself was also a bit showboaty in that regard. If you're not going to have principal characters that contribute to the story, don't have them.
Yeah.
I was wondering about Aquaman. Like, what's that? Like, I know Aquaman's a part of the Justice League, but they just went there and they're like, "We need your help for this thing." He's like, "Ah, fuck you." And that was it. I don't know.
Well, the thing is I think that the Gulag was the least developed part of the story. They kept referencing the fact that there's a riot, and they never showed it until they intervened. It's like, how hard is it to show one image? If just show it, It's like, that's bad storytelling, if you ask me. And the fact that it's like that was such a big deal that's what ended up bringing them all back together. I don't know. Again, it was just a weird idea. And then it's like, oh no, we're gonna store these guys in Atlantis. No, we're gonna get Orion to be the guards. It just wasn't. I don't know. I don't know how to explain this, but it's almost like it wasn't a big enough threat, or you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know.
Why did they call him the Batman?
Why did they? Because they want to be cool. That's why.
They didn't call him the Superman or the whatever else.
Why is it in the Justice League movie they call him the Aquaman?
Yeah, that's dumb.
Because there's more than one.
Yeah.
Oh, there is? No, there isn't.
Well, there was Aqualad.
That doesn't count.
There
It's
are
like
many
Scrappy
awful
Doo.
people.
No one counts it.
It's like Scrappy Doo. No, he doesn't count. What? Do you know who would disagree with that? Scrappy Doo.
I'm just kidding.
Handsome.
He's just a little asshole, that's all.
Like Superman.
Well, Superman should be wiser. He's like a delayed. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Like, understandably, Aquaman, for the people who are familiar with the Justice League, everybody would be like, okay, why didn't you show us Aquaman? Even if, like, to shoehorn him into the plot the way they did was like, need to think harder, people. Like, yeah, like, you know how long it took you to paint those panels, and then you're just not even gonna. You're not even going to go back here? Okay, whatever.
They could have brought him in. Even Green Lantern's another one that they're like, here's Green Lantern hiding out. And then they used his secret lair, but he didn't really figure in anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, Green Lantern.
Sitting up in space.
I think they showed him fighting in one panel, but other than that...
Yeah, like Wonder Woman broke his table. Give him a little bit of screen time. Come on.
I just want to mention one more of my favorite exchanges in the book, just because Mark Waid's one of my favorite writers. Mm-hmm. I love when Bruce Wayne figures out that they're pregnant. But then, that's not my favorite part. My favorite part is when Wonder Woman says, always the detective, now, let's test your escape artistry. I want a commitment from you. I'd like you to be the child's godfather. I thought that was a really good exchange,
Oh, no, I thought the dialogue was so stilted and awkward.
Oh, this is my favorite part of the whole book.
Oh, sorry.
There's something that's disturbing.
This whole
Did Batman use ketchup on his steak?
Yep.
Did he?
Oh my god, that's not my Batman.
That's not anyone's Batman. He asked for his stupid steak well done. Is it because he's old?
Hashtag NMB, not my Batman.
Surprising. That is surprising, but
hashtag cancel old Bruce Wayne.
Well, the well done thing is more understandable than the ketchup thing. Like, come on. He's Batman. He doesn't need
some
that.
HP or something.
Yeah, throw some HP on it.
Canonically, Batman also hates rock and roll, so just keep that in mind, Dave.
Oh, God. Shouldn't he have bat sauce? Like his own special brand? Like, hold on a second, guys.
For the bat sauce.
Do you want to know what it's made of? No.
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 All right. Sorry for the side tangent, but
I need to.
Do you think he has his own sauces? Like,
well, he's a millionaire. Yeah, I think Alicia has an actual question. So.
Oh, sorry. Continue.
Why is Batman wearing that neck brace and arm brace apparatus? What is that?
I think he's just supposed to be. It's supposed to show that he's old and worn out. You know.
Oh.
I
You're
think.
like he's like a boxer. After years and years of taking a beat down, but nightly, his body would deteriorate. But
They
he's
never
a
mention
billionaire.
it. They never mention it. So I'm like, maybe that's something that happened in a past comic book. Like, at least mention it. I don't know.
I thought it could be related to the whole Bane thing. They briefly mentioned Bane.
Yes.
And for people that know, like, Bane broke Batman's back in the comics.
Oh.
Maybe he broke it again. I don't know.
Yeah, well, he does mention that it took one run-in with Bane, and I can't remember the other character.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, because the apparatus that he was sitting, the chair he was sitting in was much more, like, involved before. The one that you see him, like, with the cane and just, like, parts of it. Yeah. Like,
That's
he was
forgivable. But the ketchup, no.
No, yeah.
What do you guys think about the fact that when they order drinks, Wonder Woman gets water, Superman gets milk, and Batman gets coffee? I think that was great.
I was so confused. I'm like, okay, all right.
Would caffeine even work for an alien though? Like, does that make sense?
No. Batman got coffee. Superman got milk.
No.
You said it
It's
backwards.
funny, like,
okay.
Oh, did I? Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
who would order milk? But I love that because he's Superman, right? He's a farmer. I think it's great.
That makes
Maybe he
sense.
was, like, trying to compare it with his cows,
So
very
he's having his coffee with his ketchup.
It's a very vanilla choice and very typical to me of Superman. It's like, oh yeah, you sure you don't want the orange juice?
Oh, by the way, sorry, I have to point out, Batman does not put ketchup on his steak. He gives his steak to that black guy.
No, he gives the ketchup to the other guy.
No.
Oh, he gives the ketchup to him.
I
Oh,
keep screwing up. He gives his ketchup to the other guy, but he doesn't put ketchup on his steak.
Yeah,
that's so
He
much
still
better.
asks
Hey, I
for-
read it in a rush.
That redeems the story for you, right, Dave?
It really does. But really, I'm just curious. Does he not put anything on his steak? Like
Doesn't look
No.
like.
would?
Is
I
he
don't mean
supposed
to
put
hang on
something
this
his
point so
steak?
much.
It comes seasoned with salt and pepper, as it
Well, he
should
lives
be,
in a cave. I guess he doesn't need sauce. He can eat a steak.
with a
Like,
couple
he puts
onion
stuff on
rings
his
on the
steak?
side and a beet.
We've been
The
talking
only
about
thing
this
you
more
need
than
on steak
anything
is
else in
roasted
this whole
mushrooms.
story. That's great.
If it's a great steak, that's true. You don't need sauce.
I just
Yeah.
aside from like the banter between them, the fact that this restaurant exists and that's where they choose to meet, because she's like, yeah, it's humbling, it's kind of funny, and then their waiter is, their server is Robin, and
Yeah.
they walk up and
funny.
they're like, hey, I'm Robin, and Batman's like, yeah, sure you are, like typical, like just in a very Batman way, yeah, sure you are.
Isn't that
I'm
like
sure,
a little
I'm
odd?
sure the
Wouldn't it
only
be like?
reason,
Go ahead.
I'm sure the only reason they had it there was for that one moment where they're doing cheers for Captain Marvel, and Superman has the Captain Marvel cup. That is probably the only reason they had it in that restaurant.
Well, no,
Otherwise, they
I
could've
think-
gone to Denny's.
I think it's because they just wanted to have more references to superheroes and toys and nostalgia and all that, you know?
Mm.
It's funny because everyone treats Robin so poorly, and it still continues even when he's a waiter.
Yeah, no, honestly, wait a minute. Was Dick Grayson in this story? He wasn't, was
Yeah,
he?
he was. No, I thought he was Red Robin.
He's mentioned.
No,
Oh,
Red
he's
Robin is
mentioned.
Tim Drake, isn't it? Isn't he?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I
If
forget.
if Dick Grayson is married to, what's her name, Mary, the one in the pink. He's here.
Hmm.
The daughter of Talia al Ghul and somebody else.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And
Starfire?
wait.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, if he's there, he's there. Okay.
Yeah, he's here. He's not, but they don't mention him.
Okay.
I feel like.
Alex Ross is weird too because he has certain little, like, he doesn't like Martian Manhunter, so he didn't want to use him, but Mark Waid forced him to stick him in that one scene. Alex Ross also hates Peter Parker. He loves Spider-Man, but hates Peter Parker, and he doesn't like the X-Men. So he's very opinionated. He's weird. Anyway.
That's for another day, that conversation.
Yeah.
But, there's lots more we could talk about. I feel like we just scratched the surface, but...
Sorry.
What? No, Jolie.
I
Go
just
ahead.
noticed that the menu of the place it's called Planet Krypton, but on the front of the menu is the planet Krypton exploding and the little spaceship, just kind of floating towards Earth. I was like, isn't that kind of like triggering for Superman at all?
A little bit insensitive, right?
Yeah.
Is that why they chose the restaurant? Was Wonder Woman like trying to make him feel bad?
I don't know, but I also like that on the back wall. There's so many like nods. There's like George Reeve. There's like a press kit in the old uniform in a frame. It's really cool. Anyway,
Also, did anyone else think that Wonder Woman was based on Kerry Russell?
no,
No?
there's no way she could have been,
How come?
because if this was written in the 90s,
96.
then Kerry Russell was like 17.
Well, yeah, so. If
She was
was
Olympian when she was
if she was in a TV show by then, her
No,
career started in. Oh, you're right. No, she wasn't big yet.
No.
Okay. I don't know. She must have been based on somebody. I don't know who. Maybe just one of his friends.
yeah, because he said Superman's based on a man that he worked with, at the
Farmer.
illustrating place that his mom worked at. This woman would have been someone else as well.
Okay.
Like the two on the front cover, that's Brian Azzarello and Jill Thompson. Who
What? Where?
Yeah, on the cover of the second one, I think, where you can see the daughter of Harley Quinn and the Joker.
Hold on. I gotta go there now.
And it's like, well, they came up together. They all came up together in Chicago, so they're part of the Chicago crowd. That makes sense. Is it the first cover? Wait, I just got to go to where there's like the splash. You can see it. No, they're both on the front cover for.
Oh yes, the bald guy, and then like the girl looks like Harley Quinn.
Yeah,
So that's okay. Okay, so that's supposed to be
So-
Brian. That's cool. Okay.
yeah. So he all over the book. Like there's people in the bus too that are other comic book artists, creators, etc. And that's why to me it feels a little showboaty. It's
You
like
know,
I'm gonna
go
put
ahead.
this, but anyway, sorry.
No, it's okay. I feel like overall there's kind of like a mixed feeling about this book, and I kind of have that too. My personal experience was I read this maybe 2 years after it was first released, and I was blown away. This was one of those pivotal books for me when I was younger, where I realized graphic novels and comics could breach out of the usual superhero stories and explore other themes. Going back to it, though, having read probably hundreds of other comics and graphic novels after it, I just don't know if it quite stands up the way it did.
Right.
And I just feel overall, if we're going to end off with any topic, one thing needs to be the purpose of superhero stories, because really the main theme of this story is hope. And that hope comes with the superheroes. It comes with Superman being Superman, not with any other metahumans going around beating up each other, but Superman being a superhero and superheroes existing. So I guess my question is, in terms of a superhero narrative, how does this work for you? Is it successful? Did it not work? And beyond that, why do you think people are so interested in superhero narratives? And I want to start with Dave and go to Alicia right after, because I'm sure Mike and Jolie, you read a lot of comics, you have a lot to say, but I want to start off with some of the people who haven't read as many capes and tight hero narratives.
Well, let me just say, I have a giant box of comics that there's like over 200, and they're somewhere in my parents' basement. But I've read plenty, but it's just been a while.
I bought that many comics this week. Anyway, go ahead.
Wow, I'm surprised, Mike. Anyways, because you're a comic guy, you like comic books. Anyways, I think the story focuses heavily on morality and tries to show the humanity in everything, I guess, even in superheroes. There's definitely the superhero aspect. Obviously, they're all superheroes in a superhero type universe, but it kind of tries to balance the two, and I think it focuses more on human element of everything. Whether or not you're a superhero, it focuses more on the morality and human element. So it's different. Superhero aspect is definitely still there, but I just feel it was just different, and I can see why people like it. I can definitely see the faults, but I think it tended to focus more on that in my one quick read today.
No, that's a very good observation. Thank you, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Alicia, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to speak to my background because, like you said, I don't have a huge background in superheroes. Mine is more kind of the magical girl trope. So Sailor Moon, Cardcaptor Sakura, Fushigi Yugi, etc. And what I like about it, and maybe this is the same for somebody who's read a lot of Caped Crusader stuff, is just that it's like here's one person who has the power to help, and it's fun to see them going into these situations and problem solving, like, and maybe that's why another reason why I didn't know this, apparently they don't always kill the villain in comic books. Because when Wonder Woman killed that one person, I was like, okay, yeah, what's the big deal? Like, they don't just do that okay, apparently that's a bad thing, sorry. you know so but yeah, in the magical girl ones, like, yeah, they don't kill the villains. The villains are brought to justice somehow and made to see the error of the ways, I guess, or just blasted with moonbeam power. um so I guess yeah, I guess what it is for me was I gravitate towards the ones who are kind of self-made, who aren't just born with this power, who are just a regular person trying to do good with what they have. So I guess kind of more like the Batmans and the Iron Mans, who they don't really have power. They're just humans, but they have access to things that give them that power. So I feel like I'm rambling without a point. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No,
I think I
it's
lost my
okay.
point. Just kind of that basis of seeing what they do with that power and seeing the inner struggle as much as the outer struggle, and seeing too, like, oh, I could do that, like here's a normal person, a normal everyman. And I guess too that's where the pastor falls so short in this one, is because he's meant to be an everyman, but he doesn't do much, and it's not convincing, so it's not
Mhm.
satisfying.
You know, that's a good point. I actually really appreciate you saying that because I was feeling the same thing. Jolie, did this work as a superhero narrative? And I guess overall, like, what do you feel makes a strong superhero narrative?
Um, it definitely answers the not so age-old question of like, what would a fight between these people look like? I feel like these kind of books always are kind of like fodder for that kind of question. Like, I don't know what a super. I think for me, I'm still looking for what a superhero narrative truly looks like. Because there's all kinds of superheroes. There's heroes who don't kill. There's superheroes who do kill, like Alicia was saying, and like I don't know what that fully looks like to me yet. Um, like, I want to say that I'm making or humanizing them makes the narrative better, but I don't even agree with that fully. So, yeah. You've put me on the spot. Do you know what? As far as superhero narratives, where there's always sort of like a civil, like, I like the whole idea of like a civil war element between all of the heroes. I would say that this one is more successful, more of a successful one in sort of the lineage of Civil War one-offs, sagas. But then I would have to go back and read them again and rank them. So, yeah. Like, I haven't even completed the whole I feel like this is a question I'll never know the answer to because I haven't read everything. Like I'm a completist, and for me to know what a superhero book or narrative truly looks like, I'd have to be fully informed, and I'm not fully informed yet.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, and maybe that's even a superhero story or narrative is fluid. Maybe it doesn't have set parameters. So that's something to keep in mind. Maybe like any sort of narrative style or genre, we attribute certain boundaries to it, but it can grow and it can become something that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, and I feel like that's like a big argument amongst the fandom is that like everyone thinks they know what that is or that there is one and there really isn't. And that's a really good. I'm gonna like take that one from this conversation and be like, look, there's no such thing. We're all arguing a moot point here. But yeah, I like that.
Cool. And Mike, your thoughts?
Well, unfortunately I think that much of fandom, the reason they read superhero comics is to memorize characters' names and see which character is stronger than the other, and dress up in the costumes. But I don't think most of them really read them for why they were created. Because I think when Superman was created, he was, during the Depression, and it was like, if somebody had the power to do anything, wouldn't it be great if they would fight for the oppressed, for the least among us, like almost like a religious figure, like the way that Jesus comes out of a culture of people living in poverty, people with nothing, people being oppressed by the Roman Empire. That to me is exactly what Superman was, the ideal of, we're in this situation where 99% of us are poor, 1% of us are rich. Wouldn't it be great if someone would fight for us? And if you go back and read those stories, he was fighting for people, getting mistreated by their managers and bad housing and all things like that. And I feel like nowadays when people read superhero stories, they treat them like video games. Like, oh, who's tougher, Hulk or Thor? And that's all they take away from it. And that's why you see people saying, man, keep politics out of superhero comics. But they don't realize they were created with politics, right? So you can't separate the two, I don't think.
I'm glad you said that, because I feel far too often in mainstream comics, we see a deficiency of heroes doing heroic things. And there's been this trend of big crossovers for Marvel and DC where they have all their superheroes battle each other. And it just gets tedious because in the end, you can just write fan fiction and have that. The point of reading a good story is to read a good story. And if that includes a hero doing heroic things, I think, yeah, that's what a superhero narrative needs to focus on.
Right.
I guess overall, is this a successful narrative in that sense, by that definition? Do the heroes do heroic things? And it's debatable. And I think what this narrative really questions is what happens when the heroes no longer do heroic things, which maybe was profound at the time. I think in 2020, that concept's a little bit overplayed. And so, my final thought is, while I do see it being an important work, I think the type of themes it addresses, I don't think they stand the test of time. Even the whole notion of what it's like to be in a world where gods are amongst you, it's been handled better in different books. And in this particular one, I didn't really get a feel of what it was like to be a person living in this world. And I think if there's one criticism, one recommendations I could make in my fantasy world of how to make this comic better, it's to focus on that. And I guess that's my main takeaway from the book. If you're going to write about people existing in a fantastical world, focus on what it means to be a person.
Mm-hmm. I'll just say one other thing. Unfortunately, I think Alex Ross is so popular and so powerful that I don't think he really knows what a great story is, and I think he needs a good co-writer. But anyway.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think Waid is a good writer.
He is.
I just don't think, because of what the mandate was for this story, that he did his best work.
Right.
Guys, when you said that, Mike, that man bear pig one, cat owl catbird, angel catbird,
Oh yeah.
That pops into my head. You're
What's
a
that?
Margaret Atwood?
Yeah, prolific author does not a good comic book story make.
Oh yeah.
Is
Well-
Angel Catbird better than this?
Don't read it.
Oh.
No.
No.
Are you
Unless
joking?
you want to like get drunk.
You
or
missed that
high and
one.
Just laugh. Don't read it.
No,
Don't.
I was there.
Were you?
Were you
Yes.
there?
I was there. Thanks for
Don't you
remembering,
see the
everyone.
deadness in his eyes? He was there.
Like talking to a Vietnam vet. Wow.
Wow. I seen some
Oh.
shit.
That was some shit. Sorry, I was reading more backstory about this. Okay, you know how Mike just said Alex Ross, unfortunately, is like super powerful. He doesn't know, like, his talent from his ego in a wall. But anyway, they were supposed to do a sequel to this. Do you know anything about the history of this book, Mike?
Well, I was gonna give you guys the link for the sequel.
Oh,
Is that
okay.
what you mean?
Well, no. No, that's not what I mean. But like, so they were supposed to do a sequel, but apparently, I wonder what happened, because Alex Ross detached himself from the project, but Mark Waid stayed on.
All I know is that they didn't really get along. They clashed, and that's it.
I wonder if it was because because he wanted to do big superhero brawls, and Mark Waid just wanted to tell a good story.
I think the thing is the two biggest writers he's worked with are Mark Waid and Paul Dini from the Batman TV show cartoon, who's a good writer. But if you notice, everything Alex Ross has done since the 90s has been with no-name writers who are probably his friends, because they'll probably just do whatever he wants, right? And I just think that, again, it's almost like a movie director that's so big, like George Lucas. He doesn't realize, dude, you need to get a writer. You can't write, But anyway. But if anyone wants to read the sequel called The Kingdom, I will send you the link.
And on that final note, Mike, I want to thank you, Jolie. I want to thank you, Alicia. Thank you, David. Thank you for joining us for this. I'm actually glad, because I was feeling a little bit bad coming into this combo, thinking I had some criticisms about this very revered book. How are people going to take it? And I'm glad that we all were able to objectively look at it together.
Right.
Actually, before I go, any final thoughts on the book?
Thank you for hosting.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it back. I really missed it.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Very quickly.
Yes.
I'm going to change my stance. I don't like it as much as I originally said. I still like the art, but my coworker, I wanted to like it so much because my coworker's like, it's so great, it's so great, it's so great, it's so great. So when you're going into it, it's like, okay, I should like this because someone else is just crazy passionate about this. And maybe it's a good thing he's not in our conversation right now.
Maybe we are grateful for that. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're far over from our time, so I'm just going to end the meeting. But thank you, everyone. Expect that post tomorrow for the next comic and the next date, okay?
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Adam. Hey, Adam, can you stay on for a minute? I want to ask you about that thing tomorrow.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm staying on with Dave, but everyone else, have a great night, okay?
Okay,
See you
see ya.
guys. See you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.